Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood, Mr. Atkinson, Mr. Goodman, for the gracious greeting this morning. Thank you all for turning out today after what was an interesting night for all of us last night in various ways. There's one unexpected prompt I was given by the intros that I should explain to you. Mr. Atkinson said that his two favorite magazines were The Economist and The Atlantic, and he wasn't sure what that said about him. I can tell you what it says about him. There are elaborate reader surveys that all magazines do, and we know about our readers of The Atlantic Monthly, founded 1857 by Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, that they are, number one, the best educated readers of any magazine in the country, and number two, the second richest of any group of magazine readers in the country. So you've been hearing all these tips about how to survive during the recession and things like that. I say subscribe to our magazine, and the problem is over. So I hadn't planned to give that little ad, but I thought I would. The circumstances that we all are aware of in the last 24 hours here have also somewhat adjusted the introduction I was going to give to you. I first was going to start out by talking about the joy of being a reporter and being able to travel around the world and see things that many other people haven't seen and bring back the information about them. Of the last 5 years, I've spent 4 of those in China, including in coal mines, in power plants, and all the rest. And so I was going to talk to you about how I was going to try to connect those discoveries from that part of the world to here. And then I was going to connect another reporting experience. One of my great passions in life is flying little airplanes. So I flew here yesterday from Gaithersburg Airport outside D.C., circling down south of Charleston because there were some thunderstorms, and going right over the part of the country which has some of the richest coal deposits, of course, and a lot of the mark on the landscape of mountaintop coal mining in particular, and talking about that. And I was going to talk about the ways in which these experiences highlighted the situation of coal. I realized that there's a different episode, of course, that I should refer to, which is what we went through last night with the water disruption, talking about the role of infrastructure, how much we all take for granted about the systems that are so expensive and so costly in all ways to maintain, but without them in operations, the world suddenly looks different. And I thought of how many places in China over the past few years I'd been where I turned on the water in the hotel and nothing came out, or if it came out, I didn't want to get anywhere near it. So I was having little flashback there. But having now had a shower this morning, having rested, I'm going to focus the presentation and tell you it is going to draw on things I've seen in China. It is going to draw on some of the mark that you all know here in this part of the world from the production of coal. And I'm going to try to present a message that from a combined international and a national political and local perspective of how the economy that matters so much to your companies here, to your people, to your state, and is such a part of the efforts that the Chamber is so admirably doing to pull together different parts of the Kentucky world. Corporations, government institutions, rising young people, and all the rest talk about the way the issue of energy use, of climate policy is going to affect your world here. And I actually am going to give a good news speech. This is not something you hear a lot these days, number one in general, number two from journalists, number three from people who have just arrived from D.C., and number four, I will get to some at the end, some darker aspects of what's going on in D.C. now. But as I argued last year in our magazine, and as I've been involved with people both in China and the U.S. in the time since then, I think that your community, with its basis in energy supply, notably coal, has reason to be engaged in a positive way in the very important political and technological and corporate struggle going on now around the world. And in the course of explaining that, I'm going to tell you essentially 3 things. I'm going to give you a preview of what those 3 are, then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you at the end what the 3 were, and then I'm going to add a few notes about the larger situation the U.S. is in now in its own politics and related to China. Point number 1, first thing I'm going to say, is that coal is inevitably going to be a major part of the world's energy solution for the foreseeable future, for the time that all of us are involved, even the young leaders you're admirably bringing in. It will be part of the mix, and that is just a reality. Number two is that the way in which coal plays that role will be and has to be different from the way coal has been used in the recent history, the history of the past century, the history of the past, of the years that have shaped Kentucky and the Appalachians for good and bad. And there are ways to think that the role can be different in a positive way. And the third thing I'll tell you is that right now, this week, this month, this year, the next 4 or 5 years, very important struggles are underway about how these factors are going to turn out, which corporations are going to be most involved, which technologies will play the largest role, how the balance of opportunity and burden around the world will be shared. And so it's important for different institutions in this country that care about that outcome, from the national level to the regional and state level, to be involved. So that is the plan for the next while. Why coal will be with us, why it's going to be with us in a different way, and why the battle that's underway now is important to all of you and worth the Chamber's attention, even beyond what you would naturally give it just as part of being the local interest. One other note of prelude. I recognize that in this room are a lot of people who, on any particular point I make, are far more expert than I am. My life as a reporter is to be the permanent non-expert. I keep going to people and saying, what should I know about this? What should I know about that? On the other hand, so if I were reporting this story again now, I probably would be coming to many of you and saying, what should I think about this or what should I think about that? What I'll try to do then is to touch a variety of areas. If in your own field of expertise you find that I have somewhat vulgarized the truth, well, we're going to have a little question session afterwards, and you can correct me, or you can write a letter to the editor. But I'll try to have enough of a perspective of overlapping expertise, so to give you a sense of how your particular knowledge fits into the larger sense of what people are saying in Beijing, what they're saying in Shandong, what they're saying in Wyoming, what they're saying in Australia, where I was recently talking with coal producers there. That's the plan. Point number one, that coal will be with us, and that any political or technological fantasy which assumes an absence of coal is, in my view, a fantasy. It shouldn't be laughed at, it shouldn't be viewed with hostility, but it should be viewed as an incorrect understanding of the situation of the world. To put this a different way, in the time since my article came out, I've received lots of mail, and some of it pleasant, some of it not, from people who are saying, oh, the world should not be using as much coal as it is. And I say, well, sure, let's agree the world should not be using as much coal as it is, but the world is going to use coal, and there's probably a greater weight that we need to put on the is and will part of the equation than the should or should not. If we say that coal from Kentucky, from Wyoming, from Australia, from China, from India, and all the rest is going to be a major or the major part of energy supply, why is that so? I think it's worth recognizing the forces of geography and of economics and of the surprising ramifications of math that make this so. Again, you know this instinctively, but let me try to lay it out for you of why this pushes so strongly towards the inevitability of coal for the foreseeable future. On the geographic front, the challenge of many sorts of energy sources in the future is that the supply is where the people aren't. If you think of wind power, this is, of course, a great challenge. The wind is in North Dakota and the Texas high plains, and the people, by and large, are not there. Geothermal power tends to be in areas, except, even Iceland as an example, where people aren't naturally. Oil, the great geographic imbalance between the oil-supplying nations of the world and the great oil-consuming nations of the world, is a huge source of strategic tension, as we all know. And at least on the nation-by-nation level, this is surprisingly not true with coal. Coal is the one source of energy where the supply more or less matches on a national level the potential areas of demand. If you take the four leading sources as countries of supply, they are, of course, the United States, Russia, China, and India. They have about 60% of the world's supply of coal, and they have about 40% of the people. And that's a conjunction of supply and demand you'd find in almost no other energy source. And it's significant that we have our national security arguments about energy supply in the U.S. The same arguments happen in every country of the world. The Chinese are, if anything, more concerned about their national security energy supply, but it's because this is, in all the big countries, it's a source that they feel is within our own borders, something that we don't have to depend on either long-range transmission lines from the wind states or the vagaries of Persian Gulf politics and transport lines. So that is why, that's part of the reason that in China, that in the United States, coal has been somewhat under half of power supplies for in recent times. And in China, it's about 70%. About 70% of the electric supply in China, as you know, is coming mainly from coal power and will likely be that for the foreseeable future. So one factor for the long-term durability of coal, in my view, is that it is where the supplies are, where the demand is too. As a side note, all of you have heard about the boom in high-speed rail construction in China in recent years. A major reason for that is to get people off the normal railroads so they can be used for coal. So the normal railroads coming down from Inner Mongolia and some other of the other areas can be cleared of these people and really opened up for the coal trucks. And there was a 2-week-long traffic jam outside Beijing last year when we were there. It was coal trucks from Inner Mongolia that just had gotten stuck on the road. So localization, apart from those issues I mentioned in China, is an issue. A second reason, of course, for coal's popularity to date and its likely importance for the foreseeable future is cost in a couple of dimensions. I'm sure that you all here are more expert on the details of pricing and fundamental cost on coal than I am, but as a order of magnitude issue, the least expensive coal can be about 1/10 the cost per kilowatt hour as many comparable green or renewable energy supplies are. And without very significant intervention by regulators or by various other costs, this is why it's going to be part of the mix for the foreseeable future. There's also a grimmer reason that people in Kentucky and other parts of the world understand about the cost advantage of coal, which is that many of the real costs of producing it are not factored into the consumer price, whether that is in miner safety or community wholeness or community pollution or environmental long-term effect and all the rest. The United States is leading the effort worldwide to try to build in some of these costs. And there's a huge debate, as you know, about having the carbon emissions as part of them, whether they'll be included or not. But so far, that will still be a long process. I will tell you that as a benchmark again, in China, during the time of your meeting today, on average, 5 or 6 Chinese coal miners will die. If this is a typical day, 5 or 6 of them will die today and tomorrow and the next day, just as part of the as demonstration of these externalized costs. So that there is that cost advantage coal still has. The related cost factor is which we see notably in the parts of the world where demand is growing more quickly, is that while there are indirect and externalized costs of coal, there are such costs of everything else too. I had a memorable interview in Beijing about 2 years ago where a government official gave me a version of the answer that Deng Xiaoping, the former Chinese premier, had given to Jimmy Carter. I guess this is the time for me to disclose, for good or bad, I was Jimmy Carter's speechwriter when he was in the White House. So if you didn't like his speeches, well, take a place in line. But if you liked any of them, fine, I'll accept the compliments. But one thing that Deng Xiaoping was saying to Jimmy Carter when Carter was opening the relationships was Carter was making the point about the limits on emigration from China and that more people should be free to leave. And Deng Xiaoping said, well, how many would you like? Would you like 1 million next year? Would you like 5 million? Would you like 50 million? The idea is that the Chinese have problems with volume too. And when people complain to the Chinese government about the effects worldwide of their very heavy use of coal, they say, well, what would you prefer? Would you prefer another Three Gorges Dam with 5 million people moved? Would you prefer more windmills? We're already leading the world and we can't connect them to the grid. Would you prefer more nuclear plants? Would that make you feel more comfortable? And the answer is, of course, they're doing all these things, and they go down a very, very long list. To say a word about nuclear, this is all within the orbit of why coal will be with us. After the disaster in Japan over this past year, I think a rational world approach towards nuclear energy would be to move ahead faster with advanced nuclear plant designs because, of course, we can move past the old plants that have failed so badly in Japan. You know that the actual result is going to be the opposite of that. We can argue about whether people and governments should assess risk more rationally than they do. The reality is they don't. And so it is likely that nuclear power is going to be retarded around the world, and with the possible exception of China, with the result that older plants will stay in operation longer and newer ones will be slower to be developed. So to bring you back to date here, I've been saying that coal is going to exist because of the geography and because of the cost, and now I'm going to say there are several fascinating permutations of simple math that mean that coal is going to be with us for a long time. The first aspect of this math challenge is that simply because so much coal is used now, so much coal is likely to be used in the future. Sort of the momentum and the fixed costs are such that even much more rapid proportional growth in other energy supplies may mean an even widening absolute gap between the amount of coal that's used and the amount of everything else. Here are just 2 or 3 illustrations. You probably know many more of them, but I'll just highlight it this way. Between 1995 and 2008, that's an important time in the green energy boom in the United States. The amount of solar power in the U.S. went up by about a factor of 3, and wind power went up by about 15-fold over that period of 95 to 2008, essentially the late Clinton era and the George W. Bush era. And during that time, but at that same time, the increase in absolute terms in power from the United States, of course, was more coal than anything else. Coal went up more slowly proportionally, but much greater in absolute terms for reasons that you can know. One other illustration of that sort, last year, the proportional growth in both wind and solar was by far the fastest of any energy sources, and yet in absolute terms, the amount of coal used went up 7 times more than was the case for wind and solar. So we have this sort of momentum point. That's one mathematical issue. A second mathematical issue that, again, you have focused on, but I think the general public has not, has been the way that Moore's law does not apply in the world of energy. Those of you in the worlds of tech know that Moore's law is what we take for granted, that computers essentially become cheaper and faster the instant we buy one. You know, the instant we buy one, the next one is better and faster, and so all the processing power that we take for granted, whether it's in Google or cloud life in general, or all the things which high-speed processing allows us to visualize, these are driven by Moore's law. Something parallel has happened in medical technology too. It's partly allied with this computer increase, but also genomics and all of its implications mean that the things we do in medicine now are of an entirely different kind from what people did 30 or 40 years ago. Many people assume that that's how life is in general. And as you know, there are many aspects of the physical world in which progress is not Moore's law-like, but rather the old Woody Hayes-like 3 yards in the cloud of dust. Cars, for example, are safer than they were 40 years ago, but they're not really faster. Airplanes, commercial airliners, are less comfortable than they were 40 years ago, but not faster, and they are certainly more efficient. And in the world of energy, as you all know, there are incremental, constant, important improvements in efficiency, but not the sort of step function breakthroughs that we're used to everywhere else.